Today, I'd like to share an experience of a protest that I went to recently. A lot of times when we think of protests, we think of things that are maybe a little bit out of control or crazy or that type of thing. But there are all sorts of different types of protests. So many times we characterize protesters as these crazy, far out people, and they're radicals, but people protest for many things, and it can be very meaningful, can lead to a lot of change, can awaken our sensitivity to where maybe there's a problem or there's an issue. So a group that I have been involved with called BLARG, it's the Brookhaven Landfill and Remediation Group, and they've been really advocating for the closing of the landfill and actually looking beyond that to really better ways to manage our waste problem. So many aspects of that problem are out of control, with the issues with plastic containers and different types of disposing of different items, and how we can do that in a better way. And I think BLARG is looking into that and can provide some guidance for us all to reflect on. So the gathering was on a Saturday evening recently, and the group gathered at about 5 o'clock, and they gathered really at a very symbolic place. They gathered at a intermediate school in North Belport called the Frank P. Long School, and that school has been really a focal point in many ways for concern in terms of people in the community, because many of the teachers and the students in that school have suffered from cancer. And there is actually a lawsuit against the town with regard to it, because the thought is that some of the odors and some of the water pollution from the landfill have crept into the school environment and have poisoned people who seem to be dying at unusually high rates with regard to cancer. And again, that connection sometimes is very difficult to prove and to establish, but it seems like there's some evidence there that this could be an issue. And so the group gathered there to show really support, and there was a beautiful prayer that was offered for all of those teachers, some of whom come from the community, some of whom come from outside of the community. And that prayer was a prayer really of thanksgiving for those teachers and for those students, and a prayer of concern, a prayer of support for parents who are grieving the loss of children because of cancer. And it established really a beautiful tone for the protest, that the people that were there gathered about 100 strong. They were gathered really to show support for the community, support for other people, concern for other people, and concern for the health and welfare of the people in the community, and that beautiful sense of support and love for one another, which is so essential to our way of life. And the beautiful thing about this protest was it was people of all ages. There were veteran protesters like yours truly, who go way back with protesting, and many who this was their first type of protest of any sort. And so great to see that we're coming together, and people of all races, religions. Nice to see that diversity there. And there were signs that were distributed. And one of the other beautiful aspects of this gathering was that the day before, many had gathered in the park, the Rowley Park that we were going to march to make these signs. So they were representative of the community. And I was given a sign about zero waste and the importance of justice in establishing reduction in our waste. So if we reduce our waste, we are working for justice. And so that was a beautiful sign that I was given. And as we marched after our prayer and a very moving speech by Hannah, one of the participants in the march, we marched to the park and a lot of chanting about we wanted to close the landfill and we wanted to protect the water, we wanted to protect the soil, we wanted to protect the air, and we wanted to reduce waste in any way we could. And part of the concern was the broken promise. There was a promise made to this community that this landfill would be temporary and that another town, Manorville, would share in this after a certain number of years. And it seems like that promise was never kept because the people in the Manorville community didn't want it, or perhaps other reasons, but it just never came to pass. And this landfill stayed in this minority community, and so it became a real social justice issue. Why are we polluting these communities, and why are we damaging the health of people in those communities? And one of the interesting things that came out is that people mentioned a little bit of the history of the North Bellport community and some of the what we call blockbusting that was done so that people who were living there, who were white, were alarmed and concerned, and this concern was actively stoked by certain capers that were pulled by agents, real estate agents, and so white people left, and it became just a minority community, and people were like, this is again a sign of injustice and unfairness. Why is the community being manipulated in that way? So we marched to the Rowley Park, about 45-minute march, and at the park there was food, there was music, there was dancing, tables set up for various groups where you could get information. It was really kind of a festive, fun atmosphere where people could share and talk with one another. And I had the pleasure of talking with people from the South Country Peace Group and also with Dennis Nix and his family. In my talk with Dennis, I was very moved by the sharing of his story. He was working at the landfill one day, and they were working in particularly with some toxins unknown to Dennis, and this was a particularly polluted site that they were working on in the landfill. And they were given really inadequate masks, just the kind of paper masks, and so there wasn't too much protection. And this negatively impacted Dennis's health to whereby he has now an asthmatic condition and other conditions related to that illness that he contracted there at the landfill, to the point now where he is disabled. And really, the difficult thing in listening to Dennis's story is that, Dennis is a very outgoing, warm man, a family man. I met his two youngest children there, met his wife, uh, Sylvia, a very lovely woman. Had a very nice conversation with them all. And, here's a man who wants to support his family. He wants to work, and because of his experience at the landfill, cannot. And you really feel the pain and the difficulty in a situation like that, and you say to yourself, this is not right. This is not just. We can't treat people in this way. This is not a good thing. When somebody is working in a job and because of those working conditions becomes disabled. And finally, the day ended, the protest ended with a documentary that has been made about the BLARG situation, about some of the programs they've undertaken. They have a community garden that they're working on, some of their initiatives to change the situation at the landfill, and to really make us all more aware of the consequences of the way we live in terms of the waste that we dispose and how we get rid of it. So it was a delightful experience to be part of this protest, and it really raises my own personal awareness about sometimes the harm that we do and to try to work more actively for justice so that we can reduce these types of harms.